Prabhu, you're able to hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. We'll start with the Jayaraga Madhava. Thank you all for joining this morning for the Srimad Bhagavatam class. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Nitai Gaura Nataraj Nitai Gaura Nataraj Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Shri Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva Srila Gurudeva Nitai Gora Hari Bol Nitai Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gora Hari Bol. Evam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrjakacharya Stotra Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrind Ki Jai. Thank you all again for joining this morning for the Bhagavatam class. Before starting the class, I want to take all your blessings. Very unqualified person to speak Bhagavatam. Just because of the mercy of spiritual master Srila Prabhupada and the devotees, I'm given this opportunity to speak something. So with your blessings, I hope I will be able to share something of value and use to all of us this morning. Prabhu, you are able to see my screen, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Awesome. Thank you, Prabhu. So today's verse is from Canto 1, Chapter 4, Text 8. Before we start the presentation, I'll just recite the invocation prayer and then we can start. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today's verse is 1.4.8. I'll chant the verse and then a few of you can chant the verses. Then we can move forward. Sago dohana matram hi griheshu grihamedinam avekshate mahabhagas tirti kurvam stad ashramam. Sago dohana matram hi griheshu grihamedinam avekshate mahabhagas tirti kurvam stad ashramam. Sago dohana matram hi griheshu grihamedinam avekshate mahabhagas tirti kurvam stad ashramam. So any of the devotees would like to chant?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes,
Sagodohana matram hi gruheshu gruhamedinam avekshate mahabhagas kirti kurvam stadashramam.
Thank you, Mataji. Anybody else?
Sagodohana matram hi griheshu grihamedhinam avikshate mahabhagas tirthi kurvam stadashramam.
Thank you, Mataji. One more.
Agodohanamatram hi grihesha grihamedinam avekshate mahabhagas tirthi kurvam stadashramam.
Thank you, Prabhu. So word by word translation, word by word synonyms. Saha, he, Sukadev Goswami, go dohana matram, only for the time of milking the cow. He, certainly. Griheshu, in the house. Griha medinam, of the householders. Avekshate, waits. Mahabhagaha, the most fortunate. Tirthi, pilgrimage. Kurvan, transforming. Tat ashramam, the residence. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation: He, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. I'm going to read the translation one more time. He, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. Go dohana matram is just the time enough for milking a cow. And then griheshu grihamedinam, at the door of a householder. And just by their presence, tirthi kurvam tat ashramam, the residence is sanctified into a place of pilgrimage. Purport: Sukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. So the context for today's verse, 1.4.8. So we have in the first three chapters, Sutta Goswami comes to the Naimisharanya where the sages are performing a sacrifice for the welfare of the people of Kali Yuga. They know Kali Yuga is in the horizon, and they know the quality of the people in Kali Yuga, and for their welfare they are performing sacrifices. Many sages are there and headed by Shaunaka Rishi, and they are performing sacrifice, and in their midst Sutta Goswami arrives, and they are very happy to see Sutta Goswami, knowing his exalted nature, and they ask him 6 questions, and the 6 questions were answered through the first chapter, second chapter, and through the second chapter and third chapter. At the end of the third chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam is introduced as when Krishna has left this world, where do people take shelter? And then the Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of the Lord given by Srila Vyasadeva, and that's the shelter of the people for Kali Yuga. So it is going to be the torchlight to give the light it's compared to the sun, which eradicates darkness. Just like that, the darkness of ignorance is eradicated by the light of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's how the third chapter ends, and then Saunaka Rishi praises Sutta Goswami for giving wonderful answers for those 6 questions. And he is questioning more so that they can hear this nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the 4th chapter, the chapter title itself is Appearance of Sri Narada. But the first 12 verses in that portion is where we are right now. We are in the 8th verse today. The first 12 verses, Shaunaka Rishi again asks questions. In the first 2 verses, he praises Sutta Goswami and his qualities. And in the verse number 3, he questions about where and how and when Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken. And then in the verses 4 to 8, he asks questions related to the speaker, the Sukadeva Goswami. So we will be looking at the last of that verse today, where questions about Sukadeva Goswami is being, or questions or characteristics of Sukadeva Goswami is being spoken. And then the subsequent 4 verses are about questions about the listener, Maharaj Parikshit. So this is we have been hearing in the past few classes. This is a great example of a perfect speaker in Sukadeva Goswami and a perfect listener in Parikshit Maharaj. So that is the example that we have to imbibe when we are speaking and also when we are hearing. And then subsequently, Sutta Goswami will start speaking and answering all the questions of the sages, and that goes to many, many chapters before the actual Bhagavatam narration is being introduced. That will start after the chapter 19, towards the end of 1st canto and beginning of 2nd canto. So that's the context of today's verse. And we'll just read the translation one more time. He, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this just to sanctify the residence. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, as a person in the renounced order of life, Sukadeva Goswami, he's very exalted personality. He is he has not even taken a sannyasa, in an official manner. He came out of his mother's womb and he is already in the elevated position. And Prabhupada says that in renounced order of life, one does not stay at take shelter of a householder. Their shelter is purely in Krishna. They are dependent on Krishna for everything. They give association to householders so that they can render some service and take benefit and so they are giving association to the householder not for their benefit but for the benefit of the householder. They take alms from the householder, not that they are badly in wanting food or money or whatever it is that the householder can give in charity. They are giving the householder an opportunity to serve the Mahatma, which is the only path in order to progress spiritually for a householder. So the preacher is in a transcendental position, and he is giving the transcendental knowledge and opportunity to serve to the householder who is in a kind of materialistic situation because of the family life. Even though he may be practicing spiritually, he has certain responsibilities that he has to perform, and in that position, association with the person in the renounced order of life, association with Vaishnavas, is the most important thing for the progression in her spiritual life. In 7th canto, so Narada Muni talks to Maharaj Yudhishthira, and in the 13th chapter, he goes through different orders, varnas and ashramas, and discusses in great detail what are the duties of each ashrama. And in the 13th chapter, the regulative principles of sannyasa ashrama, renounced order of life, is mentioned. So Narada Muni says in that a person able to cultivate spiritual knowledge, so sannyasi, who is a sannyasi? A person who is able to cultivate spiritual knowledge and renounce all material connections, and merely keeping the body inhabitable. Sorry. So he is just taking enough food to sustain his body so that he can do his service. He is not into overeating or should say not undereating. Yeah, he is keeping just enough, optimum. He is taking just to keep his body fit to do his service. And another aspect of sannyasi is he does not stay in one place. He does not call any particular place his home. He is traveling from one place to another. In that particular passage, it says, passing one night in each village. So in this way, without dependence in regard to the needs of the body, sannyasi travels all over the world. In the next one, in the subsequent verses, he also talks about what attire sannyasi should wear. So in the case of Sukadeva Goswami, we know that he is walking naked. Of course, in this current age, you cannot do that, but in the you have to be really exalted in order to be able to do that. Maybe there are people in Himalayas and elsewhere that people are able to do that, but in here it says if he wears anything at all, it should only be a loin cloth, and when there is no necessity, a sannyasi should not even accept a danda. If he is carrying anything, it should only be a danda and a kamandalu. Of course, the current age, the way sannyasis have to preach, they have to take care of certain things, and but they will take whatever the minimum necessary. We have seen many examples of Prabhupada disciples. The sannyasi, completely satisfied in the self, should live on alms begged from door to door, not being dependent on any person or any place. He should always be a friendly well-wisher to all living beings and be a peaceful, unalloyed devotee of Narayana. In this way, he should move from one place to another. He should live on alms begged from door to door. Of course, today it is not happening like that. Maybe in India, in some places it may happen, but he is living, he does not have an income. Sannyasi does not have an income. He is living on charity given by the householders. Householders' dharma is to give in charity to the other three ashramas, the brahmachari ashrama, vanaprastha ashrama, and sannyasa ashrama. So householder is a person who is generating income for maintaining his family. In addition, one of his duties is to give in charity to the other three ashramas so that they can be maintained. Of course, Krishna maintains everyone, but there is a duty for each ashrama. So he is dependent only on the Lord. He is not dependent on any person or any place. When I read that one of the pastime that I've heard about Ragnar Das Goswami came to my mind. So Ragnar Das Goswami, when he is one of the richest personality. His family was one of the richest personality in India, and he had no desire right from childhood, to enjoy the opulence of, he was the only son, but still he did not have any desire to enjoy the opulence that was around him. So when the time came, he came to Jagannath Puri and surrendered to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and took sannyasa. And he was living, taking alms outside Jagannath temple. So he will wait for people to give him something, and then that's what he'll eat. So after some time, he even stopped doing that. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had questioned somebody about that, why he has stopped doing that, he said his mood was, he was starting to, when he sees somebody coming, he was thinking, oh, this person gave me alms yesterday, so he might give me alms today also. So, and that expectation was developing. So in order to not even have that kind of expectation, he's not going to be dependent on any place or any person. He totally wants to be dependent on the Lord only for his needs. So he even quit that, and he went to the place where the waste food, at the waste prasad or the excess prasad is thrown out at the end of the day, and he takes some from that place and washes it and consumes that. Mahaprabhu is very, very happy hearing the exalted austerity that Ragnar Das Goswami was performing. So like that, not being dependent on any person or any place. So he is just, not in one place first of all, and he is not dependent on any particular. Today I will go to this householder and get this. No, that kind of expectation is not there. The sannyasi should always try to see the supreme pervading everything, and see everything, including the universe, resting on the supreme. So he should see every living entity as the spiritual being, one and the same. We read in Bhagavad Gita, right? The learned Pandita will see a dog eater, and a Brahmana in the same way. There is no distinction he sees. He sees the super soul inside. So Prabhupada also, in some of his translations, in Srimad Bhagavatam and the purport, he has also mentioned some more in terms of the qualities of a person in renounced order. The main religious duty of a sannyasi are equanimity and non-violence, whereas for vanaprastha, austerity and philosophical understanding of the difference between body and soul are prominent. The main duties of householder are to give shelter to all living entities and perform sacrifices. And the brahmachari is mainly engaged in serving the spiritual master. So that's how Prabhupada puts the four ashramas. In a brief way, what are the characteristics or the duties of each of the ashrama? And in a lecture in Bombay in 1975, Prabhupada says, all these materialistic persons, they are simply interested how to enjoy senses. Therefore, they are called Dina Chetasam, cripple-minded, or miserly. They have no other idea. So to enlighten them, it is the duty of the sannyasi to go from door to door, country to country, just to teach them about the aim of life. That is still going on in India. Still, if a sannyasi goes in a village, people will come to invite him and try to hear from him. So the sannyasi is, he not only, he is not only dependent on the Lord for everything, he has a duty to go preach. He goes from place to place and shares the transcendental knowledge and gives his association to different people. So that's the qualities of a person in renounced order. So let's see what are the qualities that Shukadeva Goswami himself possesses. So in a few verses before, in the 4th verse in the same chapter, so the first question about Shukadeva Goswami, Saunaka Rishi is asking, he says, Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekanta matir unnidro gudho mudha iveyate. Gudho mudha iveyate. So if you look at the meaning of those words, Mahayogi, he's a great devotee. He came out of his mother's womb and he walked. There was just to get him out of his mother's womb, Lord came in person. That's how exalted a person he is. Lord came in person to convince him to come out of his mother's womb. He did not want to come out into this material world and get covered by Maya. So when the Lord gave the guarantee that he will not be covered by Maya, that's when he came out and he started walking. Samadruk, he is equibalanced. He is not affected by anything. Nirvikalpakaha, he is absolute monist. Ekantamatihi, he is fixed in oneness of mind. So he is absolutely focused. His goal is very clear. He is not affected by anything. He is naked and he is walking on the streets. And the women are amused by what he is doing, and the kids are trying to play with him and tease him and things like that. But he is unaffected by any of those things. You see, in Rishabdeva's pastime also, you see the similar characteristics like that. They are beyond the modes. They are not in the body. Now, when you are in the physical body, then you experience the pleasure and pain from things outside affecting you. They are beyond this body in a transcendental state. So they are able to keep their mind fixed. Unidraha, surpassed nescience. No, there is no ignorance. He is past that ignorance. He might appear to the people outside, he might appear like, oh, he's in a mode of ignorance. Why is he walking around like that? People may not understand. People who are stuck in the modes may not understand the transcendental nature of the personality like Shukadeva Goswami. So he was absolutely fixed. So that's the quality of Shukadeva Goswami. Sutta Goswami, when he starts speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, he glorifies Shukadeva Goswami as a very compassionate person. In the 2nd chapter, verse 3, when he starts speaking, after the 6 questions are asked, he says, he pays obeisances to Shukadeva Goswami, and during that the offering of obeisances, he says this particular prayer. Yas swanubhavam akila shruti saram ekam adhyatma deepam atitir satam tamondam samsarinam karunayaha purana guhyam tam vyasa sunum upayami gurum muninam. He says, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Shukadeva Goswami, the spiritual master of all sages. Gurum Muninam. He is the master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. So here the compassionate nature of people in renounced order is being mentioned, especially Shukadeva Goswami, the person we are talking about in today's verse. The compassion can be shown in many ways. Compassion can be a direct act of compassion in helping somebody. But the way the sages and great souls are showing their compassion is by giving us transcendental knowledge. So in this particular case, Sukadeva Goswami is speaking, he spoke transcendental knowledge to Parikshit Maharaj, who was seeking transcendental knowledge, knowing that he is an exalted devotee. Sukadeva Goswami showed great compassion in sharing. But of course, Parikshit Maharaj, being a great devotee, he does not need this great knowledge. He is asking, he has been put into that situation by the Supreme Lord to ask Sukadeva Goswami the questions and get the answers so that it will be useful for the people of Kali Yuga who are fallen, who need this transcendental knowledge in order to get out of this material maya, material nature. So the compassion can be shown in many ways. Sukadeva Goswami showed it by speaking. Our Goswamis, they showed it by writing. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered Sanatan Goswami and Rupa Goswami in order to provide transcendental literature to keep the messages going. And Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami wrote so many scriptures. They wrote so many literatures to give us that transcendental knowledge. We don't directly hear from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They heard from Mahaprabhu, and that knowledge is assimilated, and they have given it to us through their literature. So through writing, one can be compassionate. Through speaking, one can be compassionate. There are many ways to be compassionate. I heard in one of the lecture, by being silent also one can be compassionate. And the example was given of Narada Muni and Daksha. So when Narada Muni had converted or convinced all the sons of Daksha to take the renounced order of life, Daksha sent them to go meditate, do austerities so that they can get qualified to become Prajapatis. But on the other hand, they met Narada Muni, and Narada Muni gave them transcendental knowledge, and they took it, and they became sannyasis, or they took the renounced order of life. So their father's desire, Daksha's desire to make them Prajapatis and to establish progeny was affected. So he got very angry with Narada Muni, and he chastised him and he cursed him that he will never stay in one place, and he will have no permanent home and things like that. But Narada Muni never said anything back. He just accepted it in silence. There are many examples we can think of like that in scriptures. One other thing that comes to my mind is Vidura, when Duryodhana treats him in a bad way. The exalted souls think that situation is also created by the mercy of the Supreme Lord for their welfare, to guide them in a different direction or take them in the right direction. In fact, if you just think about Parikshit Maharaj's situation, Parikshit Maharaj was the emperor of the world. When he knew that he had committed a mistake. He is already thinking about it. And when he heard from the messenger sent by the sage that his son had cursed him to die in 7 days, he heard the message and he did not react in any way. He absorbed it. And he in fact, in one of the shlokas in 19th chapter, he says that by Krishna's arrangement, I was entangled in this family life. And by Krishna's arrangement, he, through the curse of a boy, he made me come out of this family life so that I can get the association of the sages. So that's, compassion can be shown in different ways. And in this particular case, compassion was, Sukadeva, Parikshit Maharaj, being the powerful emperor, he could have done so many things differently. Arrested that the boy and done sacrifices or consulted brahmanas to neutralize the curse and things so on and so forth. He didn't do anything. He accepted it, and he gave the kingdom to his son Janamejaya, and he had 7 more days, so he wanted to spend it in the best of the ways, so that he can achieve the goal of life. So the same similar verse is spoken by Parikshit Maharaj when how the sages don't stay for more time than just enough time for milking of the cows. That is the amount of time that they will spend with the householder. So they don't want to take shelter of the householder. They spend only a short amount of time to give the householder an opportunity to serve. So a similar verse is spoken towards the end of when Maharaj Parikshit is receiving Sukadeva Goswami when he is at the banks of Ganges. But prior to that, before Sukadeva Goswami arrives in the scene, Maharaj Parikshit is speaking to the sages on the banks of the Ganges. He says, so very similar mood is expressed there also. What are the qualities of the sages, and by their association to the householder, how the householder is gains. So in that verse number 13, translation, the fortunate king said, "Indeed, we are the most grateful of all the kings who are trained to get favors from the great souls. Generally, you sages consider royalty as refused to be rejected and left in a distant place." In purport, Prabhupada writes that in the olden days, the place where you use the bathroom is kept away from the main residence. Nowadays, it's all combined as a bathroom within the bedroom and all that. Prabhupada says that in the old days, it used to be separated because you're attending to your different cleansing activities. Those are all not considered auspicious, or not. Those are all not considered clean. So you keep it away from the place of residence where your spiritual activity is happening. So like that, sages consider the kings as that kind of a place of refuse. They don't get association. They don't want to get associated with the royalty. Royalty maybe for outsider, but for sages, it is just like a garbage or refuse. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that to be in intimate touch with dollars and cents men or the kingly order is worse than suicide for one who desires to go back to Godhead. In other words, transcendentalists do not generally associate with men who are too enamored by the external beauty of God's creation. So Mahaprabhu was very strict when he was in Jagannath Puri in the Sannyasa order. He served as a great example. He set a great example on what a person in renounced order can do and cannot do, and he set the standard there. But in case of Maharaj Parikshit, he's not just any outside, any common man. He is already an exalted devotee. The situation was different. Apparently, the king was condemned to death by an inexperienced Brahmana boy, but factually, he was called by the Lord to return to him. We can imagine Parikshit Maharaj is an exalted devotee. He was protected by Krishna right in his mother's womb. So he knows Krishna right from his when he was in his mother's womb. So such an exalted person, how can he become bewildered? Just like Arjuna, he's an exalted devotee. He knows everything, but he was put in a situation where he was bewildered in order to give us Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, Parikshit Maharaj was put in a bewildering situation. It was a providential arrangement. He became thirsty in the forest. He enters the sage of the ashrama of Samika Rishi, and he's wanting water. He's asking water, but the sage is in a trance. What are the chances of that happening? Prabhupada says that kind of an occurrence itself tells you that it's a providential arrangement. So that kind of a person, he is not normal person. So he is speaking from a perspective of a common man. How your association is very grateful. The sages are also, when Parikshit Maharaj arrived at the bank of the Ganges, all the sages, demigods and different Raja Rishis, they all arrived at that scenario, arrived at that place, knowing that Parikshit was there, because they know the exalted nature of Parikshit also. They wanted his association too. And they wanted to be there in the last 7 days that he's going to be there to be part of this great king's life. So, but on the other hand, Parikshit Maharaj, he never showed his exalted nature, and he was never proud of his exalted nature. He gave all his he said, I am fortunate because I was born in this great family. He gave he was so humble that he gave all the credit to his forefathers. And he says, this is all happening. All of you are here, not because of me, but because of the greatness of my forefathers and grandfathers. So that's how humble he is. And further in that chapter, as you go, he says, I only desire, let whatever the snake bird or whatever magical thing that Brahmana has created come and bite me. I only desire that you all continue singing the deeds of Lord Vishnu. As I am towards the last phase of my life, I just want to hear to the pastimes of the Lord. The king said, O great sages, you have all very kindly assembled here, having come from all parts of the universe. You are all as good as supreme knowledge personified, who reside in the planet above the 3 worlds, Satyaloka. Consequently, you are naturally inclined to do good to others, and but for this, you have no other interest. Even in the verse today, it says they have no other interest to associate with the householder. They are totally beyond the modes and transcendental. Prabhupada writes in the purport, why do sages come to this mundane world? They descend to different planets as messiahs by the order of the Lord to deliver the fallen souls. On the earth, they come down and do good to the people of the world in different circumstances, under different climatic influences. They have nothing to do in this world, save and except reclaim the fallen souls rotting in material existence, deluded by material energy. So one of the, we hear Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Why Krishna comes millennium after millennium? He has given why he comes: to protect the devotees, to annihilate the miscreants, and to establish religion. And one of the reasons he established this material world is we desired to enjoy separately from him. So he wanted us to give an opportunity to go do enjoy. But he didn't just throw us out. He gave us all the scriptures, and he sends these exalted devotees in order to give us association, and so that we will slowly start asking, why am I here? Who am I? And give us the knowledge that and take us back. So reclaiming the material souls is also one of the reason the material creation is done. There are many reasons, but one of the reasons. So that is achieved by him coming directly and giving the message, like in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or any other incarnations of the Lord, or he sends his messengers in the form of sages or pure devotees. So to Sukadeva Goswami, when Sukadeva Goswami finally comes, while they are all waiting, while Parikshit Maharaj is talking to the sages, the king rises up and he pays his obeisances, and he says, "O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us into places of pilgrimage. All by your presence here as my guest. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee." So he is putting himself in such a humble state that he is nothing. In fact, kingly order is something that sages don't mingle with. So I am very unworthy, and by your mercy, you have given me the opportunity to serve. So, in fact, I think I'm not remembering the verse that I read it, but when people go to Ganges, in common people, they go, the purpose is to wash off their sins. When you go to a place of pilgrimage to wash off your sins, but the place of pilgrimage doesn't get affected. Why it doesn't get affected? Because the place of pilgrimage has these saintly people who are able to sanctify the place, just like a disinfectant. We sanctify the place. The saintly people, by their association, disinfect all the sins in that place, and that place remains a place of pilgrimage. So saintly devotees like Sukadeva Goswami, they don't normally approach kings. Example of, in Chaitanya Leela, Maharaj Prataparudra wanted to get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's association, but Mahaprabhu, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya came and requested Mahaprabhu to give his association to Prataparudra, Mahaprabhu completely, refused. He's a king. I am a sannyasi. I cannot associate with him. Of course, in a later stage, he wanted to show also the exalted nature of Prataparudra at the time, at an appropriate time when Prataparudra was in the right. His longing, his desire to associate increased, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya came with the plan of Prataparudra, the king, was using a broom and cleaning the path in front of the Jagannath Rath Yatra cart. And when Mahaprabhu saw that day, he already gave him the association at the end of that day. So, of course, those pastimes are designed to show the exalted nature of, orchestrated to show the exalted nature of the devotee. For a devotee who desires to go back to Godhead, two things are strictly prohibited, Mahaprabhu says: worldly enjoyers and women. Therefore, devotees of the standard of Sukadeva Goswami are never interested in seeing kings. Maharaj Parikshit, out of his devotional humility, the other end, the receiver, what a quality he has, felt himself an unworthy descendant. Kshatriya Bandhavas. I am just, all my worthiness comes only from the great Kshatriya forefathers I had, even though he was as great as his predecessors. And Parikshit Maharaj says in the verse 33 that simply by remembering you, not even seeing you, serving you, simply by remembering you, our house has become instantly sanctified. And what to speak of seeing you, touching you, washing your holy feet, and offering you a seat in our home. So I think this is the verse where I read it in the purport. Prabhupada says that the saintly people, they disinfect the accumulated sins, and the holy places continue to remain sanctified by the grace of the devotees and saints present there. If such saints appear in the homes of worldly people, their accumulated sins become neutralized. The accumulated sins of such worldly enjoyers become neutralized. So therefore, the holy saints have no self-interest with the householders. The only aim is to sanctify the house of the householders. And the householders therefore should feel grateful when such saints and sages appear at their doors. Of course, in our Kali Yuga, in our current environment, there are no saints appearing at our door. With the system established by Prabhupada in under the shelter of ISKCON, we get some opportunity to host our spiritual master and other sadhus in our disciplic succession. And when they are here in our city where we are residing, we get an opportunity to host them, get association from them, and even a moment of association is very, very valuable for a householder, or anybody for that matter. For a householder, even more so. A householder who dishonors such holy orders is a great offender. It is enjoined, therefore, that a householder who does not bow down before a saint at once must undergo fasting for the day in order to neutralize the offense. So a householder's duty is to give in charity, get association from such sages. In a subsequent verse, when one of the last verses, Maharaj Parikshit's conversation before Sukadeva Goswami starts speaking, he says, without being inspired by Lord Krishna, how is it that you have voluntarily appeared? You are moving incognito to the common man and are not visible to us who are on the verge of death. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump here. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Lord to help one achieve in success in the spiritual life. The conclusion is assistance and help of a bona fide spiritual master means to receive the direct help of Lord himself. And then Sukadeva Goswami is asked questions by Parikshit Maharaj. I want to just share this one before we conclude. I heard this from His Grace Radha Dyuti Prabhu in a lecture. He was saying, he was quoting Subhashitam from Chanakya Niti. He says, Ayuktam Swamino Nityam, Swamino Yuktam, Yuktam Nichasya Dushanam, Amritam Rahave Mrutyuhu, Visham Sankara Bhushanam. So it is not like something that might look inappropriate. An elevated person may use that inappropriate thing in a correct way. But something that may look very appropriate also, a person who's of inferior nature or consciousness, he can cause destruction to him by doing that. And then he quotes two examples for the two cases. Visham Shankara Bhushanam. When the churning of the milk ocean happens, the poisonous, most poisonous halahala comes out. And the demigods are perplexed and they go to Lord Shiva. And he, being the greatest Vaishnava, he can even handle the poison. And he drinks that poison to protect them. And Mother Parvati holds it in his neck. And then his neck becomes blue. And he is known as the blue-necked one, Nilakanta. And it becomes a jewel for him. He's adorned with that poison. So poison, that's something that others cannot handle, Vaishnava could handle there. In the same way, the other side, so if the person is of an inferior nature, what happens? Even a person, an appropriate thing can be a destruction for him. So when the nectar is coming out of the churning of milk ocean, and when Mohini Murti is distributing it to the demigods, Rahu, he hides himself as a demigod. He disguises himself as a demigod and mingles with them just to get the nectar. He gets the nectar, but then Lord beheads him with the Vishnu Chakra. So even though he drank the nectar, he lived with his head separated from his body. That divine nectar, which was going to give immortality to the demigods, it became disastrous for Rahu. So like that, the appropriateness is decided not just by the whether it is just by that characteristic of that thing. It is more decided by the worthiness of the person, the consciousness of the person. Now, some examples that came to my mind, we read about the association. Why did Sukadeva Goswami spend 7 days with Parikshit Maharaj when he's not supposed to spend more than the 30 minutes or whatever the short time to give association to householder? Here he had a higher purpose. He was being the instrument in giving Srimad Bhagavatam through a great devotee like Parikshit Maharaj. Same way Mahaprabhu associating with King Prataparudra, Haridas Thakur, he let the prostitute stay in the house for 3 nights and he gave her the holy name. Now, they are all exalted people. We cannot imitate them. We should not be imitated by us. Srila Prabhupada, in fact, that Prabhu was saying, Srila Prabhupada, he, as part of his preaching, as part of the compassion for all humanity, he wanted to meet Indira Gandhi. He was a sannyasi. She was the political leader of India at that time. She not only is a political leader like a king, but she's also a woman. But Prabhupada, he had a higher purpose in order to meet Indira Gandhi. So the same application you can say. Now we cannot do it. Our consciousness is not at the level where we can do it. But exalted devotees, they are able to do it. Why as a takeaway, why we should associate with Mahatmas? So that is the door for opening to the liberation, to go to the spiritual world. So in 5th canto, 5th chapter, Lord Rishabdeva, he instructs his sons and says, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. So that is the door which can open the door for liberation for us. So otherwise, by association with the materialistic people, the door for hell is open. So the Mahatmas are the well-wishers. They are peaceful. They are not having any abominable behavior, and they care for they are compassionate. So that is our the benefit of associating with them. So I think I'll finish there. Sorry, I went a little bit over time and not giving time for discussion. I thought I put less number of slides, but apparently I didn't time it well. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for listening patiently and allowing me to say something of, I hope it was something of value. Hare Krishna. Please share any comments or corrections you have at this time.